The rain poured relentlessly over the dimly lit streets of Washington, D.C. The city, bustling by day, had now settled into a quiet, eerie stillness. Barron Trump, the son of former President Donald Trump, walked briskly down a side street, his hood pulled up to shield his face. It was unusual for him to be out alone at this hour, but tonight was different. Tonight, he needed space to think. As he approached a deserted alley near a cafe, his eyes fell upon a man huddled against the brick wall. The man was wrapped in a tattered coat, his unshaven face barely visible beneath the hood of an old sweatshirt. He wasn't begging for money. Instead, he was quietly reading a faded piece of paper, his lips moving as if reciting a memory long forgotten. Barron hesitated. Something about the man seemed different. Unlike the usual strangers he saw on the streets, this man's eyes, though weary, held an odd intensity, like someone who had known privilege once but lost it all. "Cold night," Barron finally said, breaking the silence. The man glanced up, startled. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Barron's face, scanning him as if trying to recognize something familiar. Barron reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded note. He had written it moments earlier, unsure why, but driven by an impulse he couldn't explain. Without a word, he handed it to the homeless man. The man took it slowly, his fingers trembling slightly as he unfolded the paper. His brows furrowed as he read. His breath hitched. His eyes widened. Then, he gasped. What was written in the note? Why did it shake the homeless man so deeply? The homeless man's fingers trembled as he unfolded the note, his breath uneven. The paper was crisp, its creases fresh, as if written just moments before. His eyes darted across the page, scanning the words that made his heart pound against his ribs. Though the full message was obscured by shadows and the rain-soaked dimness of the alley, a few phrases stood out. "You were meant to see this. I know who you are. It's time to come home." A shiver ran down his spine. His throat tightened. The ink on the paper might as well have been carved into his soul. How could Barron Trump, a kid he had never met, know about him? His mind spun, fragments of a past life flashing in his memory like static from a broken television screen. A mansion. A desk cluttered with important papers. The scent of expensive cologne. A life he had long abandoned. But that was impossible. No one knew who he was now. He swallowed hard and looked up, his gaze locking onto Barron. "Where did you get this?" His voice cracked from years of disuse, yet there was a force behind it. A desperate demand for answers. Barron's expression remained unreadable, but there was something behind his eyes, an understanding, perhaps even a challenge. "I think you already know." Then, without another word, Barron turned and walked away, disappearing into the misty night, leaving the man clutching the note like a lifeline. For the first time in years, the homeless man felt something other than numbness. He had accepted his fate long ago, another forgotten soul lost to the streets. But this note? This changed everything. He needed to know who had sent him this message and why. Pulling his ragged coat tighter around his frail body, he stumbled out of the alley and into the neon glow of the city. The note felt like it was burning a hole in his hand. Every instinct screamed at him to let it go, to crumple it up and toss it into the nearest drain. But he couldn't. His feet moved almost on their own, carrying him past buildings he barely recognized, toward a destination he wasn't even sure of. Was it a trick? A setup? Then, as he crossed an intersection, he heard a sharp intake of breath. A woman walking past him had caught sight of the note in his hand. Her eyes widened, her face draining of color. "Oh my God," she whispered, staggering back. Her reaction sent a jolt of fear through him. She knew something. Who is this woman? And what does she know about the note? The woman's face had gone pale, her eyes flicking between the note in his trembling hands and his weary, unshaven face. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The homeless man hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should answer. But something in her expression, fear, recognition, disbelief, told him that she knew more than she was letting on. Before he could respond, she hurried away, disappearing into the crowd. But the fear in her eyes unsettled him. What had she seen in this note that shook her so deeply? With a deep breath, he glanced down at the paper again, his mind pulling him back to a life he had buried years ago. Once, he had a name that carried weight. He wasn't just a man lost to the streets, he had been someone. Jacob Whitmore. A former financial advisor to some of the most powerful figures in New York, including billionaires, politicians, even the Trump family. Years ago, Jacob had been at the top. He managed wealth, made high-stakes deals, and shook hands with the elite. But that world had chewed him up and spit him out. One bad investment, one betrayal from someone he trusted, and everything crumbled. He lost his fortune, his career, his family. His reputation was shattered overnight by a scandal he never saw coming. The people he once called friends vanished. One day, he was wearing $1,000 suits. The next, he was sleeping under bridges, learning to survive in a world that no longer recognized him. And now, after all these years, a Trump had handed him a note that called him back into that world. The note mentioned a place, a building Jacob hadn't stepped foot in for over a decade. A penthouse. The last time he had been there, he was still a man of power. The thought sent a chill through him. Why was Barron Trump leading him back to this place? And how did the boy even know who he was? His feet carried him toward the address scrawled at the bottom of the note. The city felt different as he walked through it, not just because of time, but because of what it represented. Memories clawed at him. The lights, the sounds, the expensive cars speeding past. It was a world he once belonged to. And yet, he was invisible to it now. When he finally reached the building, his heart pounded. The penthouse lights were off. It looked abandoned. But as he stepped inside, something caught his eye. A single object, placed carefully on the grand marble table in the center of the room. His breath caught in his throat. It was something he had given to Donald Trump himself years ago. What was the object, and why was it left for him to find? Jacob's fingers hovered over the object on the marble table. The dim light from the penthouse window cast long shadows across the room, making the scene feel surreal. It was a gold-plated money clip, engraved with the initials DJT. Donald J. Trump. Jacob's mind raced back to a time long ago when he had personally gifted this to Trump after closing a multi-million-dollar deal. It had been a symbol of success, a token of their partnership. So why was it here, left out in an abandoned penthouse, waiting for him? Something wasn't right. He picked up the money clip, turning it over in his hands. Then, he noticed something else, a small folded piece of paper tucked underneath it. His heart pounded as he unfolded it. In elegant handwriting, a single sentence sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't supposed to end this way. Jacob's breath hitched. What wasn't supposed to end? His career. His life as he knew it. And who had left this message? Jacob clenched the note in his fist, his mind clouded with questions. He had spent years convincing himself that his downfall was nothing more than a cruel twist of fate. But now he wasn't so sure. What if he had been set up? What if someone wanted him erased? And more importantly, what did Barron Trump know about it? Jacob needed answers. He had to find Barron. Finding Barron should have been easy, his face was known worldwide. But every attempt Jacob made led to a dead end. He tried reaching out through social media, his messages went unanswered. He went to locations where the Trumps were rumored to be, but security kept him far away. He even followed the news, hoping to spot an upcoming event where Barron might appear, but it was as if the boy had vanished. The more Jacob tried, the more the world seemed to push back against him. And then, one night, he felt it. The unmistakable sensation of being watched. As he sat on a park bench, lost in thought, a man in a dark suit approached. His features were sharp, his presence unnervingly calm. "Jacob Whitmore," the man said, his voice like steel. "It would be wise to stop." Jacob's pulse quickened. "Stop what?" The man smirked, tilting his head. "You know exactly what. Some secrets are meant to stay buried." Before Jacob could respond, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. He hadn't asked for Jacob's name. He already knew it. That night, Jacob couldn't sleep. His past had come back to haunt him. Barron Trump had left him a message that made no sense, and now he was being warned to stop searching. As he sat in his rundown shelter, staring at the note, his old flip phone buzzed. He frowned. No one ever called him. Slowly, he picked it up. The screen was blank, no caller ID. A single message appeared. "You're not supposed to know this." Jacob's stomach turned to ice. Who sent the message? And what are they trying to hide? Jacob's hands trembled as he stared at the message on his phone. "You're not supposed to know this." His instincts screamed that he was in danger. Whoever sent this wasn't just watching him, they were trying to silence him. But he was done running. He had to find Barron Trump. After days of failed attempts, Jacob finally caught a break. Through a homeless shelter volunteer, he learned that Barron was scheduled to attend a private charity event that night. The location? A 5-star hotel, secured like a fortress. Jacob knew he had one shot. Ditching his ragged coat, he blended in with the catering staff, walking with purpose as he slipped through the service entrance. The air was thick with perfume and cigar smoke. Wealth and power moved effortlessly around him. Then, across the grand ballroom, he saw him. Barron Trump stood tall, his sharp features a perfect blend of his parents'. But his expression was different from what Jacob expected. It wasn't cold or distant. It was knowing. Like he had been waiting for him. As Jacob moved forward, 2 security guards intercepted him. "Wait," Barron's voice cut through the tension. "Let him through." The guards hesitated but stepped aside. Jacob exhaled, stepping closer. "You left me the note." Barron nodded. "I needed you to see it." Jacob swallowed hard. "Why?" The young Trump glanced around before motioning him to follow. They walked toward a quiet balcony, away from prying ears. Barron leaned against the railing, staring out at the city. "My father never told me much about his past," he began. "But I found something. A file. It had your name in it." Jacob's stomach tightened. "What was in the file?" he asked. Barron turned to him, his gaze sharp. "It wasn't just about you. It was about a cover-up." Jacob's breath hitched. "Someone set you up, Mr. Whitmore. You didn't lose everything because of a bad investment. Someone made sure you disappeared." Jacob felt like the ground beneath him had vanished. All these years, he had blamed himself. But if what Barron was saying was true, his fall had been orchestrated. "Who did this?" he whispered. Barron hesitated before saying a name that made Jacob's blood run cold. A name he never thought he'd hear again. "It was my grandfather." Jacob's heart slammed against his ribs. "Fred Trump?" Barron shook his head. "No. My other grandfather." Jacob blinked. "Robert Engel." The name hit him like a sledgehammer. Robert Engel. The powerful investor, a silent but deadly player in the financial world. A man who always stayed behind the scenes, but who controlled everything. Jacob had worked with Engel years ago, right before his downfall. Could it be possible that Engel had been the one to destroy him? And if so, why? "He's still pulling strings," Barron said. "I think he knew you'd come looking. That's why you got the message." Everything clicked. The warning. The text. The shadowy figure telling him to stop. Robert Engel was still watching. And now, Barron Trump was caught in the crossfire. Jacob's fists clenched. "Why did you help me?" he asked. Barron sighed. "Because I want to know the truth, too. And because I think you deserve justice." Jacob stared at the boy. In a world full of corruption, power, and secrets, Barron Trump had done something no one else had. He had given him a chance to fight back. And for the first time in years, Jacob Whitmore felt something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. But as they stood on that balcony, a black SUV idled on the street below. A phone call was made. A voice spoke two chilling words. "It's begun." The screen fades to black. What will Jacob do next? And what is Robert Engel hiding? This ending delivers a strong emotional payoff while setting up a potential sequel. Let me know if you want any refinements. Rocket. The revelation hung heavy in the air. The name Robert Engel had shattered everything Jacob thought he knew about his downfall. For years, he had wandered through life as a ghost, convinced he had failed himself. But now he knew the truth. And the truth was dangerous. Barron Trump watched him carefully. "What will you do?" Jacob exhaled slowly. "I don't know." He wanted justice. He wanted answers. But most of all, he wanted to reclaim the life that had been stolen from him. And yet, standing next to Barron, he realized something else: the young man had just risked everything to help him. If Robert Engel had destroyed Jacob's life to protect his secrets, what would he do now that those secrets were unraveling? Jacob placed a hand on Barron's shoulder. "You should be careful." Barron smirked. "I think we both should." They shared a knowing glance. An unspoken alliance had formed. But just as Jacob turned to leave, Barron spoke again. "Do you know why I left that note for you?" Jacob hesitated. Barron's gaze darkened. "Because I think you're not the only one he destroyed." The words lingered like an open wound. If Engel had ruined Jacob's life, how many others had suffered the same fate? Jacob walked into the night, heart pounding. This wasn't just about his past anymore. It was about all the others. And he wasn't going to stop until he uncovered everything. What other secrets have been buried? And just how far will Robert Engel go to keep them hidden?